This segment is sponsored by Our Home Magazine.
Vintage ironwork can be found all around Richmond. Our next guest and her partners give walking tours focused on extraordinary examples of historic buildings in our city. And you can read all about it in the latest issue of Our Home Magazine. Jennie Dotts is the Vintage Virginia Walking Tour realtor at Virginia Properties, and we welcome her to Virginia this morning. You and I had a chance to talk while the show's on this morning, and we're both native Richmonders.
Yes.
And I grew up in Chesterfield. Where did you grow up?
Grew up in the West End,
Yeah.
but I live in Church Hill now because
Yeah.
I've always been drawn to old houses and the beautiful architectural features that really define Richmond. You know, things like ironwork, where
Yeah.
you see these iron fences and railings and balconies, and you know you're in Richmond and you couldn't be anywhere else.
Right, and Tredegar was such a huge factor in Richmond's history. Did that where most of the ironwork came from?
No, and I'm glad you brought that up
Yeah.
because that's a misperception. Tredegar was busy building or manufacturing armaments, and in fact they were called they provided the Confederate Army, for instance, with most of their armaments.
Yeah.
But no, they didn't do decorative ironwork. Those were smaller foundries, most of which have disappeared. But we do have OK Foundry, which is in Southside, and they date back to 1911. And for instance, if you have an old iron fence, like I have one, and an old creaking gate, and if you're missing a part, you can go there and they can replicate those missing features for you.
You and I were talking about Caravotti's, which is another resource if you have an old house, and they know, you know, what goes with what and where it came from and things like that. Are there other places around town where you can find things? You mentioned the OK Foundry.
The OK Foundry is can recreate the missing pieces, but like for instance with our fence, we were missing sections of it, or some were deteriorated. So we went to Caravotti's and we bought some panels and posts, and then Jamie O'Neill at OK Foundry, he and his fantastic crew replicated. They make these sand molds and they have patterns, and they can recreate the missing parts.
It's amazing. I mentioned to you I had a house on Kensington Avenue, had a slate roof on it.
Oh, you lucky person.
Well, lucky until one of the slates was missing.
Until you had to pay to fix it, right?
So it was finding a match was an adventure, kind of like this fence work. Look how beautiful
It's
that is.
so beautiful, and what's amazing is when you look at how delicate the scroll work is, and the little flowers and stars and little details, leaves, they're made of something so structurally solid. And yet they can look so delicate.
Yeah.
And that's what we love in Vintage Virginia. It's about bringing attention to these beautiful things that surround us. They're all around the city, and we need to pay attention to them. We need to preserve them because they were built to last. Yeah. That's why they're still here 150 years later.
People do come to Richmond, and one of the first things, and we have people that come from all over the world and are on our show, and they say, wow, the architecture here. And then we drive by it every day.
We do, and that's what our walking tours are about. And we've got one coming up on Sunday, April 26th, to look at outbuildings, because behind a lot of old houses, for instance, on Church Hill, and you know the fan
Carriage
because
houses
you lived
and
it.
things like
Yes.
that.
A lot of people don't know what those buildings were. Yeah. You know, a carriage house may have been renovated into a beautiful apartment, but it wasn't always that. So I think it's really important for people to know why it was originally built and what its original purpose was. And then, you know, you think about the craftsmen, the artisans, the businesses that were around that created these things, the materials, the craftsmanship. We want to preserve that as well.
Yeah. So a carriage house, by the way, is a 19th century garage, kind of. And you know, it's interesting because if you are able, and this is probably what you do on your tours, is to take your brain back to that time and think about how things were.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's you know, we love these examples of traditional architecture and design, but they're also part of our social history. You know, we can tell a lot about who we were as a city, as a community, by looking at these buildings, these fences, these architectural features. They tell us about who we were.
Gotta take the tour. Read more about this in Our Home magazine and find it on the newsstands today, or subscribe at richmondmagazine.com/home. You'll find them on Facebook at Our Home Magazine and on Instagram at Our Home Mag. I want to thank all our guests and thank you for watching. Virginia This Morning returns tomorrow at 9 a.m. right here on CBS 6. We hope to see you then. Have a wonderful Wednesday.